Now, the amount of work that you do with a marker float can vary from water to water. If you're fishing something like a gravel pit where you know for a fact there are going to be lots of underwater humps, gullies, bars and plateaus, clean areas, weeded areas, you're probably going to have to spend quite a lot of time with that float to find the fish holding spots. On a lake like this one, I know first of all that there aren't any major features. We're not going to be looking for great big bars. It's not that kind of lake. It's a fairly silty lake, and what we're probably going to be fishing is a slope. So I'm not going to do a lot of marker float work here. What I'm trying to suggest is the amount of marker float work you do should be dictated by the situation you find yourself in. So what I'm going to do here is a basic examination with the float, starting off on the left hand side of the swim and making a series of casts working further right each time until I've covered quite a wide arc in front of me. And what I'm going to be looking to find out are the sort of depths I'm going to be fishing in and whether there are any differences in the nature of the bottom out there. So let's start off on the left hand side and make a reasonably long cast with the float. And what I'm going to do now is wind that float down, and initially I'm just going to drag the float across the bottom. And the key point here is I'm watching the rod tip and I'm feeling with my left hand for any irregularities on the bottom. Now, what I can tell you is that if you watch that tip and feel, you've got a very regular bend in the tip, and it feels as if I'm dragging the lead through custard. And that tells me that there's a thin layer of silt on the bottom there. If I was casting into very thick mud, which I don't like fishing in, the lead would actually stick, and then as I pulled it would spring out. And it's not doing that, but I can tell that the bottom is fairly soft. So that confirms that what I'm fishing over here is silt. And as I work the float back, I'm actually feeling and looking for any vibrations and irregularities in the movement of the rod tip that suggests a hard patch on the bottom, which might be sand, gravel or stones. Sometimes when you're dragging a marker float back, the tip will lock over and really snag solid. When that happens, you've basically pulled it into weed. It'll pull free with some effort, but weed feels like you've got the lead jammed. But I'm not picking any of that up here. If you pull the lead across sand or gravel, what you'll find is that the tip will knock and you'll feel the vibrations down the line. Now, an area of sand or gravel in so much silt could be a really good place to put your hook bait. Carp fishermen get very preoccupied with hard patches on the bottom simply because they're excellent places to put your bait. You know damn well that if your bait's on gravel or on sand, the fish are going to be able to see it and find it very, very easily. Whereas if you're fishing into silt, it's a little bit more difficult for the fish to actually see it. They'll sniff it out. Heavy silt is very difficult to fish in. This sort of soft silt isn't really a problem, provided you use the right sort of rig, and we'll look at those in a moment. But basically, from what I can gather here, it's a fairly regular silty bottom. Silt's probably just a few inches deep, and there's no real irregularities there. So what we'll do now, having got a little feel for the basic nature of the bottom, is cast the rig back out to the left hand side of the swim, and now we're going to start looking at depths. So again, I'm going to make a nice long cast. Out she goes. I'm going to wind the float down until it jams up against the lead. You feel the rod tip start to lock up. And then what I'm going to do is use the bait runner on the reel. So I engage the bait runner. Bait runner is really vital for this kind of work. And I'm going to start to measure off 1, 2 feet. Remember, I've got a 1 foot marker here. So the distance from the reel to the marker is a foot. I've measured off 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. And the float's just literally popped up on the surface out there now. So that tells me that at around about 70 to 80 yards range, I'm fishing in about 4 feet of water. Let's just drag the float back a little bit further, all the time feeling for any irregularities on the bottom. We might find a little hard spot, a little gravelly or sandy bit, which would be well worthy of investigation. Bringing it back about 10 to 15 yards and winding the float down to the lead again, engaging the bait runner and measuring off 1, 2, 3, 4. Incidentally, if the float won't pop up, the usual reason is that weed has clogged up the ring that attaches the lead onto the line. So it's a pretty sure sign that you've pulled the float into weed, and you'll probably have to drag it in and clear it and make some more exploratory casts. Let's bring it back now about another 10 to 15 metres. Not really feeling any changes in the bottom. Definitely fishing over silt here. Let's just check the depth there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just over 5 feet. So basically I've come from 4 down to 5, and it would appear that this is a slope. Let's just see. We'll bring this back now another 4 or 5 feet. That sensation there has got a little bit heavier, so it's more difficult to bring the lead back. I would guess that the silt is a little bit heavier now closer in. And that's valuable information, because I don't want to fish in very heavy silt. Let's just check the depth again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still 5 feet there. And we'll come back again. It's cleared again now. It's coming back nice and steadily, so there's obviously a band of thicker silt out there at about 30 to 40 metres. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just over 5 feet. Well, I haven't found any major blinding features out there, but that's quite useful information in itself, because if there was a big feature like an underwater island or something in front of me and I wasn't fishing it, then it might cut down my chances. But because there aren't any major fish holding features out there, there's nowhere that's going to hold the fish up. So what I'm going to try and do is intercept travelling fish. I have learnt quite a lot, actually. I've learnt the areas in the swim where I think the silt is too thick to present my hook bait, so I'm going to avoid those. Secondly, I've also learned that it slopes off from left to right and also gets progressively shallower the further out I go. And it seems to me, just getting a feel for this area, that if I fish in about 5 feet of water at 60, 70 yards out, that's going to be about right.